Hello, everyone. I'm Captain Logan, and it is not Spawn year. It's day 37 of my comic review video day calendar, and I kind of lied about what publisher I was going to today. I said I was going to go to Marvel or someplace else because I've done a couple of DCs in a row, but I was rummaging through things and I realized that I haven't done any Supergirl yet this year, and so I thought I would go back to DC one more time. I've got Supergirl on the brain, like a lot of us right now, because of the newly announced slate from DC Studios, previously DC Films, and of course headed up by James Gunn. He recently gave us a list of all the movies that are going to be coming out over the next few years, and one of them is Supergirl, based on the Tom King series that's real popular and suddenly a lot more popular. You can't even get your hands on it physically right now. Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. I'm actually going to be reviewing that with Austin soon. And anyway, that is as far away from what I'm reviewing today as humanly possible. I was thinking, I wonder if I own any Peter David Supergirl, and I wanted to check that out because that's a series that I always hear really good things about. And I think I read the first, I remember liking what I read of it. I think I read the first trade worth or so 12, 13 years ago, but I mean, it's been a really long time now. And it turns out I own 20 or 30 issues of this, nothing like all of it, but I went and found an amusing cover and thought I would check that out and review it today. This series went for a pretty long time. This has a sizable run and only ends. Peter David wanted to continue it. And his idea, by the way, for how he was going to finish this book up sounded really interesting. He wanted to make it kind of a Birds of Prey sort of thing where you'd have three different versions of Linda Danvers all together in one book. And I wish he'd gotten to do that because that sounded really interesting. But it kind of ends for the opposite reason it begins in the first place. So it starts, and by the way, I had to do a little bit of research into this because I didn't remember exactly what his version of Supergirl was, and like I said, it's been too long since I've looked at any of this. So some of this is coming from research I did, 20 minutes ago. But anyway, this part of it I remembered though. So his Supergirl is not from Krypton. She's not Kara Zor-El. He invents a new Linda Danvers that throws back to the original. So she takes that she has that alter ego, but she starts as a woman named Linda, or a girl, I should say, named Linda in the first place, and she has this interesting kind of darker road to redemption thing, almost like a reverse Jason Todd or something, where she starts from a real rough and tumble place and wants to make up for all the terrible things that she's done in the past. She's a little bit tragic, but finds this real positive, more happy-go-lucky side to herself. This is, by the way, Supergirl number 62, and I wanted to take a look at this one because it's fun to see superheroes fight other heroes' rogues galleries. So she's going up against Two-Face here, and because the cover has a really fun play on words. It's no quarter given. I like these kind of puns sometimes on covers. They really catch my eye. And I mean, it's not perfect because Two-Face usually is flipping a $50 or maybe a full dollar sometimes coin, not usually a quarter, but it still played for me. I couldn't help but pick this one up. Not the best jumping on point in the world, not real easy to read all by its lonesome, so I'll catch you up to speed with as much as I read about this series, and I was careful not to read too far about plotting here, because this is another one of the series that I really want to read cover to cover at some point. I didn't want to know too much, but real quick, bare bones breakdown of who this character is and where she comes from. So this version of Linda starts as this kind of street rat who makes a lot of mistakes and is kind of thrown into this horrible gang life. And she does a lot of bad things because she doesn't think she has a choice, running around with her kind of bad guy, evil boyfriend Buzz, who is in this issue. And one of the reasons I needed to read up on it, because nothing is given to us here if you haven't read before. There's no recapping about who this guy is and why he's mad at her and why he ultimately is trying to kill her with a clone of her. But we'll get into all of that in a little bit. So it's a little bit complex, and I still don't know all the ins and outs of it because I haven't read the book. But basically, the idea is he has been a bad influence on her, and she has to atone, make up for all the mistakes she's made in being in league with him. And she, at some point, has this weird incident where she blends with Matrix Supergirl and becomes almost a third, separate entity. And I'm sure that's where a lot of her, positivity and bubbliness comes from. But she gets Matrix Supergirl's powers, and again, she is not Kryptonian, and eventually Superman warms up to her and kind of sees her as an adoptive sister, and then eventually she has this split, almost like the Superman Red, Superman Blue thing, where she is now a separate entity again from Matrix Superhero, which is really interesting identity stuff. Like, who is she now without that version of her that has kind of helped her to become a better person? And I guess there's a whole period where she's like an angel and she's got wings. This whole thing gets real weird, goes to celestial places. There's a lot of kind of occult stuff in it. And now she's in Gotham, which is an interesting place to put her because she grew up in kind of a similar situation to what she's seeing here in Gotham, but still, wonders if Batman is a crazy person, and then understands his extreme psychology once she spends like 2 hours in Gotham, where she says, I would also go crazy. I'd also go batty if I lived here for any amount of time. And so it's weird how gritty and dark this book is and kind of can be, but also has a lot of levity and a lot of lightness to it. And she's, both of those sides of her personality are on display just like they are in the book. So it's a really interesting juxtaposition. But I'm very curious to go back and see what all of this is about. And again, this is really interesting as kind of a transition from the Matrix Supergirl thing all the way back to Kara Zor-El again. So here's what the actual issue is about 7.5 minutes into this video. So the idea is Two-Face is working with Linda's old boyfriend Buzz, who, and again, I haven't read the previous few issues here, so I don't know the ins and outs of this, but apparently spending time with her the way she is now, he's been finding his humanity some, and maybe he has the potential for that sort of redemption as well. And she doesn't fully understand his background and how he became the way he was, and so she's been... And Peter David, by the way, is always really good at actions and consequences, making his characters, flawed three-dimensional human beings, but still sympathetic, and giving them, letting them make mistakes, letting them pay for them, learn from them, grow as characters. He's shown us this over and over and over again with his Hulk run, what little I've read of that, and Spider-Man 2099, etc., etc. And he's doing that here as well. Supergirl herself, Linda, is somewhat responsible for his turn back to the dark side, because apparently he told her a story about when he lived in Kansas. I don't know if they're both from Smallville. It was like a Smallville gang or wherever they were, but he apparently tries to make her think in a previous issue that he was trying to help this girl there, that and she didn't trust him, thought that he was still kind of bad, and so she at some point leaves him, and he resents her for that, and so he kind of, in his mind, finds himself again, and he sheds all of that humanity and compassion that he was starting to build, and of course she's got to feel guilty about that. And so in so doing, he does the most insane thing as possible, which is he teams up with Two-Face and decides to clone her. And Two-Face has this kind of mad scientist, I don't want to say on his payroll. I guess he's also kidnapped this guy and is making him clone Supergirl. And the scientist has this philosophy that Two-Face is taking advantage of, that everyone should have the right to clone people if they want to. It's this real extreme. There's also some kind of Saturday morning cartoon in this as well. He has this real extreme philosophy that cloning should be like anything else in business, where the government shouldn't get involved, and anybody should be able to do it if they want to. And the big consequence for that crazy line of thinking is Two-Face goes, well, what about me? Why shouldn't I be included in the masses with that and be given the right, like anybody else, to make a person out of somebody else's DNA that I stole, or that this crazy guy Buzz gave me so that he can eliminate his superpowered ex-girlfriend? This comic is nuts, by the way. Nuts in a very different way than the Grant Morrison JLA book that we did yesterday. So anyway, about half of this issue is Supergirl pretending to be an airheaded cheerleader, looking for information on where Buzz is. And that wears thin a little bit. That's my big criticism of this issue, especially just because I haven't been reading this book, so being kind of reintroduced to her this way, I kept kind of waiting for her to start acting like herself, and it's a little cutesy. I get the joke. She's, pretending like she doesn't have a brain in her head, and she's beating up guys with pom-poms and kicking them around, and it goes on too long. I'm also not a huge fan of some of this cartoony art. I think it looks better with the bad guy side of things than it does with Supergirl just running into bar after bar. This weird look on her face, she looks like a totally different character at the bottom of this page. But anyway, I do like this choice of where she's interrogating people, because this is a Supergirl that, again, has a massive dark side. She used to hurt people and torture people for a gang, and she still sometimes taps into that to get things that she needs. So it's kind of ironic that she finds Gotham real icky and Batman to be too dark for her taste. But at the same time, she's got some Batman in her, certainly, as well. And so it's kind of interesting to see somebody with a Superman-esque mantle, being Supergirl, who's trying to live up to that standard, but who is very much like a midpoint between a Batman and a Superman. But anyway, I really like this panel where she's taking this guy in this bar who knows more than he's saying about what she's trying to figure out, and puts him, and he's leading her to Two-Face, and puts this guy up against glass where it looks like part of his face is messed up like Two-Face. That's a really cool image. And then, this might be going too far for some people, but I enjoyed it. You get to the bottom of the page, and she says, "Who are you?" Or he says, "Who are you?" And she says, "I'm Batman." And she literally, like I didn't think we'd get an explanation for this. I don't know that I needed one, but it's kind of fun that Peter David did it anyway, where she's got the like white pupilless eyes like Batman. And I'm like, how does she do that? And we find out that she literally rolls her eyes into the back of her head. It's just a thing that she's able to do. I don't even think she's had superpowers, because I think she said she did it when she was a kid. So it's just a thing that this character can do. I don't know that we necessarily needed that. I think this guy is freaked out enough that she wouldn't have to like go pupilless like that. But then there's got to be a part of him that's wondering, like, is it true? Is this actually Batman in disguise as a cheerleader? And her dialogue balloon goes in the shape of a bat symbol, which is a lot of fun, and I like a lot. So then it just kind of, I don't want to say degenerates, but it turns into this crazed mad scientist plot where Two-Face, I guess Two-Face is not the mad scientist, but he's monkeying around with genetic engineering, and he makes this scientist create a bizarro Supergirl for Buzz, who again is angry with Supergirl for abandoning him, and at the same time is glad that happened because he's found his two-dimensional bad guy side again. And Two-Face's big plan. This page is real kind of disturbing. His big plan is to go and clone all of the Arkham inmates and have an army of evil Arkham inmates. I don't feel like Peter David really has much of a take on Two-Face. He kind of uses him as a means to an end here. So to be fair, he's drawn like the real classic kind of Silver Age Two-Face, and he doesn't really have the multiple personality thing. He's kind of just obsessed with the number 2, and we do get a little bit into how he, his kind of tragedy and pathos, and that he has this whole speech about how it's not having your face ruined, and like women don't want anything to do with you, and children think you're scary, and ask their parents what happened to you, so much as having to talk about that out loud. And so you get this kind of one moment of vulnerability, but the rest of it, he is kind of intentionally cartoony, I think. And we have some fun with the number 2. Supergirl has to do some detective work, which she's not used to doing, and it maybe makes what Batman does look a little bit too easy, because she maybe figures things out a little bit too simply, a little bit too quickly, but she is trying to. There's this clue that has to do with Mark Twain. She's trying to figure out how Mark Twain has anything at all to do with Two-Face, and it's a little bit of a 60s Batman sort of riddle, where she says that it turns out that like Mark has to do with like a place that you go, like making your mark in a play or in a movie, and then Twain is like never the twain shall meet, and she gets to the number 2 through that somehow, and then she goes, wow, this is exhausting. She has there's this fun panel where she goes, like, if I had to think this much, it would make my head hurt, which is kind of funny because she's clearly pretty intelligent, and is saying that after she's pretending to be a brainless cheerleader that doesn't maybe do any kind of thinking. Not to say that all cheerleaders are that way, of course, and to stereotype girls that decide to become cheerleaders, but that is the stereotype that she is pretending like she embodies. And then you get to the end of this, and she's in bad shape, and it looks like she's going to lose to Bizarro Supergirl, and that's the cliffhanger. That's all you get. It doesn't even say to be continued or anything. You just turn the page, and it's letters pages, and you're like, oh man, that's she's in a pickle there. So anyway, that's what happens in this comic. It's a little nuts, honestly, but I enjoyed it. It was kind of weird to read by itself, and like I said, it does require some prerequisite, and I had to go read a little bit about this version of Linda Danvers, but I'm glad I did that. And once again, I'm a broken record. I've said this with a bunch of stuff, but this makes me want to go back and read this whole thing, which is a thing I've meant to do for a long time. Don't know when I'm going to prioritize that, but hopefully I can find some time to talk about it when I finally do that. But anyway, that is today's review. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you again tomorrow for another one, and we'll definitely, almost definitely, not do DC tomorrow. We'll do Marvel or some other company. In the meantime, thanks so very much for watching and listening. I was Captain Logan, and happy reading.